Welcome to Guards Down. Join your host, Greg C. Washington, as he explores how people from various backgrounds have overcome bouts with trauma and complicated grief. If you're stuck, know someone who might be, or want to be in a position to help someone, you're in the right place. We can't wait to share the tips and tricks we've learned on our journey to healing and putting our guards down.
Hey everyone, this is Greg Washington and welcome to the next episode of Guards Down. I have with me today Maurice Philogene. How's it going, Maurice?
It's good, Greg. What's up, man? Thank you for having me.
Look, I appreciate you coming on. I just got to tell everybody, when I first met this brother, I was amazed. You know, I met him on the mountaintop, the powwow at the mountaintop that Jerome hosts, and I didn't know anybody. And as we were getting to talk and, you know, share and tell our experiences, I mean, when he started talking, I was at the edge of my seat listening, just noting and pen and pad in hand, just taking all kinds of notes. And so I had to have you on because, I mean, brother, you got so much experience and knowledge to drop. And so I just appreciate you coming on.
It's my pleasure, man. I'm happy to be here, and however I can help the audience, that's what I'm here to do.
Indeed. All right. Well, look, let's get to it. Of course, you know, the show is all about how different cultures deal with trauma and grief. And so, you know, tell us your background.
Sure. So again, thanks for having me on. My name is Maurice. As you know, I live in the Washington, D.C. area. Was born in New York, in Queens, New York, and then grew up in Boston primarily. So I claim Boston as where I'm from. I was there from age 6 or 7 to age 18 before I came down to the DC area and went to University of Virginia. My family is an immigrant family. So my dad and mom hail from Haiti. My dad from the northern part of the country in a small town called Port-au-Paix. And my mother from the capital city of Port-au-Prince. And most of my family emanates from Haiti with some roots that head back into France. So my family is a French-speaking family and a Haitian Creole-speaking family. I personally picked up Portuguese along the way, just as my life kind of diversified and I met different people. And then, again, what brought me to the DC area was University of Virginia back in 1993, and I've been here ever since.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you have military experience as well as police experience. Do you feel like those two kind of coincide with each other and, you know, your character and who you are? Do you feel like it's two completely separate roles?
No, it's all one ball of wax. I did think about this a little bit when you asked me to come and speak with you. Everything that I had, just for your listeners and stuff, my professional background is a bit diverse. I've been at a consulting firm for 23 years as an executive. I was in the military for 23 years as an officer. And as you know, Greg, I retired as Lieutenant Colonel back in October and was a special agent for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations for years. And before that, a security forces or military police commander. I've been a street cop for the past 12 years in the DC area. And then outside of that, I have a lot of entrepreneurial ventures, including apartment or multifamily investing via apartments and mobile home parks and restaurants and things of that nature in DC. So it's a lot. But in all of that, you were asking if the police and the military work was kind of all related. It is. And you know where it came from? My family was a very traditional immigrant family in that my father valued education to its fullest. I mean, he couldn't give us a ton, but what he could give us was a basis for education. So I always had that. But what I missed in certain cases, because my father would always send me to higher institutions, like he struggled, he was a teacher, but he struggled as a bus monitor to have enough money to send me to a private school. I struggled on the friendship base a bit growing up. What saved me was playing football. Because if you think about it, football was 12 cats on one side of the ball, or 11 cats, I should say, on one side of the ball, trying to get the ball over the end zone line or trying to stop the other team from getting the ball over the end zone line. So there was always this family and camaraderie. I love that when I hit that in middle school football and high school football, and wanted to continue that in college ball, and walked on and played a little bit at the University of Virginia, but it didn't go the way that I wanted to. I love that camaraderie so much that I even tried out for the pros one time, but I realized it wasn't my path and I didn't do well enough there. So after college, I started seeking the same kind of, I want to be on a team trying to achieve the same goal type environment. The military is absolutely like that, even if you're on the officer side of the house, because your team is your command, if you will, or your troops are your team. And then I found my police department much later in life, and the reason I did that at 33, which is very late to be starting in that type of career, is because I missed the huddle. Like, I just missed the 11 guys who would look at each other in the huddle and then break and then go do something together and try to achieve a common goal. And that's pretty much what policing is, right? You go to roll call, you figure out where there are community issues, you roll out together, or if there are one-off issues, you back each other up, that type of thing. So I've always been of the nature of, I'd rather be part of a team. I'd like being part of a team, achieving a common goal, and that's kind of the common thread that I've seen with this military and policing lifestyle that I got involved with.
And so, man, having been a lieutenant colonel, retired from that, and also 12 years in the force, the police force, you've had to have had a bunch of experiences, both good and bad. And so my first question, which I like to ask everyone, is did your family, your parents, the people around you teach you how to deal with grief and trauma growing up?
No. That's a point blank no. It never really came up. Just like, you know how big I am on financial freedom and lifestyle design and all those types of things. The concept never came up. And I don't think it was because my parents or my family was ignoring the issue. I think it just, especially for a Black family, I just don't think trauma and grief from a mental health perspective is something that we talk about in the Black community, or in any community for that matter. We don't talk about it enough. So when you are a 18-year-old being sent off to college by yourself 600 miles away, and you don't have any money, and you call your mom, I remember this, I called my mom the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, got in a little bit of trouble, needed some money, and I called her and she said, well, what do you want me to do? Because I have none, you know? You got to figure that out on your own. And I did. But then you get into, like, there are growing pains that happen when you jump from a place like a university into the real world. When I went to combat training, or essentially basic training for military police officers in Texas, I remember graduating on October 3rd, 1997, and driving from Texas to Virginia to start my first job. Didn't have a house, didn't have clothes, didn't have anything, and you have to figure it out on your own. And whatever the mental stress levels you go through, it was just nothing that my family ever talked about. Similarly, on the military side, I think now in the military profession, mental health is such at the forefront, so much at the forefront, it's better. There's a long way to go, but it's better. But when I entered the military in 1997, and then did my 3 or 4 mobilizations and many TDYs, it's just not something that came up at all. So, well, came up from a can we help you perspective. It comes up now. I'd say since 2015, 16, I've seen DOD or the government pay a large attention to those types of issues. But from a family basis, I mean, when has mental health really been that big of an issue for us Generation X and below folks, right? It's just not something that comes up. So we find our own mechanisms to deal with it, whether it's healthy or destructive, like alcohol or anything like that. But my family definitely didn't have the wherewithal to talk to me about those types of things.
Got you. And so you kind of lead into, a great point of, mechanisms that you had to learn, of course, on your own, and how to deal with trauma and grief. So the first question is, do you think there's a cultural difference in how people cope with, and what have been some healthy and unhealthy tools and techniques that you've used to cope on your own that you learned or had to unlearn?
Coping mechanisms. Yeah, I mean, unhealthy and healthy. You come up with your own. You know what? The powwow at the mountaintop where I met you, that Jerome Myers put on, I think that was a huge catalyst for my life, even though I was in my early 40s. And here's why. Because all of my coping mechanisms were internalized. Everything that I did to deal with stress and trauma and family issues and entrepreneurial issues, issues working in the W-2 corporate world, it's just not something I would ever talk to people about. In fact, I would like put, here's a mechanism. When I have a lot of stuff going on and I just look to my left because I have massive Post-it notes all over my walls with things that I need to get done and things that are bothering me, I would just get them out of my head. So I don't know where I learned that. I'm sure reading one of the professional development books that I've read over these past decades, but I would take any issue and put it out on a piece of paper so I could see it and try and deal with it. That's one particular mechanism. But the problem I made, the mistake that I made, relative mistake, right? But the mistake that I made, Greg, was dealing with it all on my own. So when I did go to the mountaintop and recognize that there were other Black men like me in this space, that helped. When I did start recognizing that, look, I'm a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity and I can lean on my fraternity brothers and be radically vulnerable with them and talk with them about what I got going on, that helped. So I would say, you know, I had my own little mechanisms, right? Writing stuff down on a piece of paper, talking to a few people, but I don't think it was really until recently, like in the past 5 years, that I recognized being around like-minded folks or being radically vulnerable with people that you trust and being able to talk about whatever your issues are, that's what truly helps you. And I'm not talking about, you know, 30 people. I'm talking about the 2, 3, 4 that you truly trust. So I'll throw that out there. And then the second thing that I want to mention is when I came back from my last deployment in late 2016, for the first time, I went to, it was mandated, but I went to a behavioral specialist to just talk through all the issues that I may have gone through being deployed to the Mideast and Africa. It was the first time that I had sat down with a mental health professional, and I rave about it because that person had the ability, especially because she didn't know me. I think that's the key. I do so many things and I have a bit of an A personality that it's not always easy for people to take on what I have to talk about. But this young woman who's an amazing professional sat me down and helped me resolve a couple of issues and why I was feeling the way I was feeling coming back from deployment, and feeling a little bit lonely and depressed and all those things. That is really, truly a mechanism that you can go to. Like if you have a problem with your teeth, you go to a dentist. They're trained in working with your teeth. If you have a problem with your physical stature, you work with a personal trainer who's been trained in helping you get the best from your body that you want to get from your body. If you want to buy apartment buildings, we all go to mentors, right? It's the same thing for behavioral health and making sure that your mind is healthy. So I'm glad that I saw her, but I didn't have mechanisms growing up. I did create several of my own, but the largest mechanism now for decompressing and dealing with issues is talking to like-minded people, for sure.
Got you. Okay. And I would also definitely agree with you as well when I was at the powwow, because I internalized a lot. And I mean, you know, just like you, I would deal with it, but it still left me in a steady state of feeling bland and it, you know, executing. And so, you know, my little bit of joy or happiness that I got came externally from like my kids and my family, seeing them doing good, but it wasn't, me being able to express that or, have that. And so having that chance to open up and share with you guys and talk, that really helped put my mindset in, in a new way, in a new light. So I can
Exactly.
appreciate you saying that, it's key to be able to process and unpack some of this stuff with people that you can trust and go through.
100%. I mean, and that's why military folk tend to talk to military folk, because it's relatable. That's why police officers tend to talk to police officers, relatable. Black folk with black folks, relatable. Like, you just find a common thread. It doesn't have to be color or what you do. One of the areas, you know about this, but one of the areas that is on my mind constantly is this notion of the matrix, and Jerome talks about it. Our common friend Jerome talks about it all the time, but it was something that was on my mind well before. Is we're here on this planet to live life to the fullest, to the extent that we can. And of course we have to work, and of course we have to do the 9 to 5. But I do believe that somewhere along the way, people lost the direction of the original intent of work, which was to get out of the 9 to 5 thing. So when you sit in a corporate America space and everyone is constantly running and trying to achieve the next level and the next item and sell the most and do all these things, that's fine if it is, for me, that's fine if it is intentional, such that you can live your best life now. I have found that there are a lot of people who think the way that I do, who are living off very small amounts of passive income, or traveling around the world, or being very intentional with their kids, or whatever. So it goes back to exactly what I said, like associating with like-minded people and having people around you can speak to about those types of issues. And everybody's issues are different. So yeah, if you can find people who have common thread as you, be radically open with them and be vulnerable and talk to them a little bit and not internalize, I found that has suited me very well in the past few years.
Well, tell us, what were some of the signs that you were dealing with grief and trauma, feelings, thoughts, actions?
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out like what was one of the best examples, and I have to go back to when I came back from that deployment in 2016. So I was in the Mideast, specifically Turkey, for a long time, and then I was in Eastern Africa, running around a bunch of different countries, executing the mission that we were supposed to do. And you know what I loved about it? I wasn't shot at. I wasn't blown up. I didn't have those particular circumstances, and I'm grateful for that. When I got back, I found myself totally out of my own character. Not the A personality. I am a extroverted introvert. I like to keep to myself and stay in my lane. But when I'm around people, I tend to be really happy and things of that nature. And man, I could not figure out in August of 2016 what was going on with me. And it was with that behavioral specialist that I did, in a way. What it was related to was, we exist on this planet to, whatever your happiness place is, right? And for me, it's helping people. And what I found out when I was in a kind of a military capacity is everything we do, especially when you're overseas, is to help that local community, especially for the type of work I was doing. I was interacting with high-level foreign government officials, doing a lot of liaison with the local community, spending a lot of time with kids in schools that needed resources and things of that nature. I was significantly impacting a ton of people. And from a security perspective, so I was a special agent, what we did and do on a day-to-day basis in the overseas environment is everything around force protection. So making sure 3,000 people on a particular base have the ability to sleep in ignorant bliss because we were able to stop a threat from coming towards that installation or that embassy or what have you. Okay, so I did all that for 2 years straight. And then you come back to this US environment, which is beautiful. I think the US is the best country in the world. but you are just shutting off all these amazing things that you were doing and going back to something like taking the metro and going to work and trying to make a company as much money as you can make them. So it just messes with you. It really affected me, where I was going from impacting the world to impacting someone's bottom line. And that was that is not being shot at, but that is a very traumatic thing for someone like me who wants to be on this planet to do good.
Mm-hmm.
The mechanism by which I was able to kind of identify what was going on with me was simply by having conversations with a behavioral therapist 4 or 5 sessions. And she helped me figure it out. She helped me figure out that my lifelong goal and dream has nothing to do with being on the corporate side or balance sheets. It has to do with helping people out in the world. The military gave me that platform to do that. And because it was taken away for a while, it really affected me. So that's one instance where I kind of recognized what was going on. Now, I've had on the police side, like I've been in plenty of shootings and car chases and fights and taser incidents and carrying a woman out of a burning building 7 flights down. And none of those were traumatic to me because those were helping. In every instance, it was about helping people. So it seems for me that no matter what I do, if I'm in a capacity of helping someone, it's never trauma for me because it's helping someone. But if I am in a capacity of helping myself or helping someone's bottom line, I don't vibe with it well at all, right? I want everything I do to be geared towards impacting somebody somewhere and making their life better. So I have figured that out about myself.
Yeah, I like how you put it. The capacity of helping someone is not trauma in that situation of being a traumatic event or experience, because you are putting the needs of someone else before your own. And so I can definitely resonate with that. And I appreciate you sharing both on the military side and on the police side. And I mean, that just says a lot about your own resilience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And you know what, Greg, let me add one more thing. It extends. I think a lot of military personnel, and I know I'm getting heavy on the military thing, but it's just because of the connection of you and I, because we both serve and what have you. It doesn't have to be in that sense only. Even in my entrepreneurial ventures today, I'm pushing hard and buying apartment buildings and restaurants and doing all that stuff. Do you know that I struggle with it if it is not wrapped around helping somebody who is up and coming in the industry learn what I'm doing and helping to build them up. I actually struggle with doing deals when I am the only person involved. I actually don't like it at all. I was talking to my business partner this morning. We're looking at another mobile home park to buy in Pennsylvania. The reason it is so easy for us to do the work together is because when we talk about it from the sense of giving our family resources in the future to exist and operate, right? We're not talking about it from the bottom line stuff. So, if you are military, police, corporate, whatever you are, maybe take stock of what it is about that particular activity that makes you happy and makes you tick. I don't think it's the bottom line stuff. And I've said this in other interviews where I've said, if Robin Williams was happy with all the money that he had, then he'd still be with us today. I mean, the brother had $300 million and unfortunately took his own life. I wonder if he was impacting the people that he wanted to impact, or if he felt like, kind of like where Dave Chappelle went, where he was giving away his creativity on behalf of money, right? He was trading his creativity for money and he disappeared. And then he came back and now he's helping a lot of people. Man, when we focus on helping people in what we do, it just makes things a lot easier. So it's not just in the military sense, because I'm sure you have a lot of listeners who aren't military themselves. Find the thread of what you are doing that makes you happy and focus on that.
Find the thread of happiness. I agree. And so with that being said, and you kind of, lead into it, Because the next question I was going to ask, well, a person dealing with trauma and grief, how can they help themselves? And you kind of hit on that with, you know, finding your thread of happiness. I personally like to say, you know, I'm in constant pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
Because for me, you know, you can only think about one thought at a time. You know, that's just, you know, humanly, you know, part of us. And so you have to train your mind on what you want to think about. And so, you know, I had a previous podcast where we talked about, you know, if you're constantly thinking about the past, you're going to be depressed.
Yep.
You're constantly thinking about the future, you're going to be anxious and have anxiety. But being able to live in the moment and, you know, pursue the things that make you happy, being mindful and being present in that moment, like, really makes a difference.
It does. So your question is like, how people, what can people do? And I did say about like the what is your thread of happiness? I'll break it down even further. Okay. I know that but it is unique to each individual. So what I'm suggesting is not for everybody else, but what I found for myself, because I did the work in spending time with someone who helped me kind of talk through this and formulate this. There are 3 things that matter to me in general in terms of being happy. Okay. The first thing is to be in love, right? My family, my romantic relationships, those types of things. Like, I don't really exist in this world well by myself. And I want that meaningful connection to people and family. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to be loved by a community. If I am loved by a community, that means that I am doing something positive to impact that community. That came from, I recognized that when I was in Turkey and I was doing a lot of things within the community, and a good friend of mine threw me a birthday party and all these community members showed up that I had no idea even knew who I was. None. It's just that I was being very intentional about being part of, there's not a lot of brothers running around Turkey, right? So I was being very intentional about being part of a community and doing good things. And then that community reciprocated to me. So the second thing is being loved by a community. Even here where I, let's say, patrol at night or spend time with business owners during the day on policing issues and stuff like that, I really appreciate what they give me. So being loved by a community. And then the third thing is constant learning. I really struggle with this notion of the rat race. You know this. I mean, this is coming up a lot. When we like artificially compact ourselves to doing the same thing day in and day out, and we are not immersing ourselves in some type of learning environment. So all this travel that I do, Greg, like all those 96 countries that I went to, it wasn't because I'm trying to get to every country in the world. No, it was because that when you immerse yourself in a new country, you are forced to learn their habits, their culture, their money habits, their food, how to get by, how to order a taxi, how to get to a hotel, how to rent something, whatever. You are constant learning the way that we used to learn when we were kids, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. It was always something new. My brain fires in a different way when I am in a mode of constant learning, whether it's travel, personal development, going after a new business venture, working with someone like you. So those 3 things, being in love, being loved by a community, and constant learning, those are the 3 pillars of my happiness, and I figured that out. There's a common thread of happiness between all those things. For other people, instead of just existing in the day-to-day, you know, the alarm goes off, you turn it off, you get up, you take a shower, you put your clothes on, you eat breakfast, you go to work, you come home, you have that 1 meal of light, you go to bed, and then you press repeat. That's existing. Whatever it is that makes you happy, like, figure out what those things are and focus your life around, try to focus your activities around that thread. I think it'll make your day-to-day way better. But for me, I found those 3 particular things that as long as I have those ingrained in my day-to-day, I seem to be on a much better place than I was without it.
Got you. And I'm glad you touched on the travel aspect when it comes to constantly learning.
Yeah.
For everyone, you know, that's watching, if you look at his wall behind him, That's every he's ever been. And so when he got on, I was like, oh man, you've been everywhere and you still got more places to go, right?
I still got more places to go. You can be intentional about your life. You can be, I don't know what you're seeing in the let me see what you're seeing here. That one, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
This is I mean, we have the COVID issue right now, but this says the nature spot, PEI Canada. So that's Prince Edward Islands, Canada. This is where I want to take my family, especially my little one, and his mom's side of the family is Canadian, because that part of the world is supposed to be one of the most beautiful places to go, but it ain't the Caribbean, it's not Jamaica, it's not, it's not all those types of things, which is nothing wrong with that, but I would like to do something radically different for my family. So I'm intentional about it. You throw it up here or you put it in your notebook, wherever you want. Whenever I walk by this into my laundry room, I'm seeing these little sticky notes of the things that I got to get done in context of those 3 pillars that I talked to you about. So they're here. There's another resource. Get it out of your head. Get it into a wall. Get it onto something that you see every day. Whether you believe it or not, the law of attraction does work in some capacity, whether it evokes emotion in you and makes you do something or makes you plan something or whatever. But yeah, the travel is certainly part of the constant learning, in the same manner that I hired a new mentor on a business level this past this past Friday, right? So I've hit a plateau on the business side, and then I hired someone to help me push to the next level. It's constant learning. And if I'm in that space from a mental perspective, I'm much, much, much more in control and happy.
Got you. Okay. The caveat to that is, how can others help a person that is dealing with trauma and grief?
Man, how can others help? So I just think, how do I help the people that I care about?
Yeah. And how can they help you?
Yeah, I mean, 2 things, I guess. I love putting the word radical in front. I think I get that from Gary Vee or something, but radical empathy and radical openness. I'm pretty sure I get it from Gary Vee. The first one, empathy. My desires for life are very different from other people's desires. My perspective on life is very different from other people. People who live in, I don't know, Somalia, their perspective of life is very different than you and I, Greg. You can have radical empathy for the way that people are, even with all the stuff going on with Black Lives Matter and policing stuff in this country right now. I don't have to agree with people, but I can have empathy in paying attention to what their views are and giving them a voice to the extent that you can manage it, what have you. Have empathy for people. Just because you are who you are doesn't mean that somebody should be like you, period. Just because somebody doesn't speak your language doesn't mean that that you are better than them. So I tend to, and I think I get that from all the travels and all the things that I've done over time, being exposed to blue collar, white collar, no collar. I feel like I can speak to any collar and fit in any room, but that's because I have radical empathy for anyone at any time for any reason. So I think that's the first thing. So if anyone will ever approach me with a problem, or somebody talks about their issues, I have empathy for them for that issue. Not sympathy, empathy, just meaning understanding. And the other thing is just openness. It's like, actually, let me twist that. Not openness, just availability. Just stop with all this, like, we don't have time for people. I'm too busy. Hey, you want to talk to me? Calendar it. I'll talk to you about your issues next Monday for 12 minutes between 9 and 9:12 before my next meeting. It's exhausting, man. People will make themselves available for the things that they want to do and for the people that they want to be with. That's just the bottom line, right? Elon Musk runs 38 companies or something like that. Like, he's available. You can still track him down one way or the other. But that's how I think you can help people. Have radical empathy for them, and be available for those people that you know you can impact their lives. And you don't have to say anything. Many times you don't need to say anything. It's just listening. And not listening so you can regurgitate an answer, just listen. Sometimes people just want you to listen. I've gotten to the habit of when people talk to me and they'll say something, one of my first responses will be like, yep, so what do you think you should do? It's not always, we don't always have to solve the issue. People just need a sounding board for an issue. So it'd be those two things for me, having empathy and being available for when people need you.
Gotcha. No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. And I hadn't even looked at, this concept of radical empathy. It makes me, wonder, it kind of sparks motivation, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not sympathy, it's just having an understanding and being open to having an understanding about somebody else's view and their struggle and what they're going through. And I definitely feel like with what's going on now and, all over the world, it really just takes people communicating, being open, and having empathy to just understand. Share with us about your thoughts with this whole police brutality and what you officers are going through, on the front lines out there.
I'd be happy to. So it's I'm in a weird juxtaposition with the whole thing because first, I'm a black man. I have been since I was for the past 44 years, right? Second, I'm a father. I have been for the past 20 years. And then third, I'm a police officer. I have been for the past 12 years. The first thing is, I think it was May 25th, George Floyd was murdered, lynched, if you will, period. There is no justification for that type of activity anywhere, not even in policing, but in humanity. So that brother was murdered, period. That's the first thing. The second thing is there are many others like him, and for some reason, his particular example, where he was actually murdered on live TV or on time and time again, and people watched it, it sparked something in a lot of people. What struck me about the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, was that many other people were saying all lives matter, and it actually happened during Pride Month or close to Pride Month, I believe. So there are a lot of other worldly issues at the moment. But every time someone would say, well, something else matters, you were taking away from the issue at hand and you were just watering it down. That's what struck me about it. It is not that anything else doesn't matter. It's that the issue of the day was that particular issue and people were watering it down. So I feel some kind of way about that. But everything does matter. But in this instance, we are talking about that Black Lives Matter. In the same manner of my two kids, if my 7-year-old is talking to me about his issues, I wouldn't want my 20-year-old to come intercept it and say, what about me? I would say, listen, I'm dealing with this issue right now. I will come talk to you later. Let me deal with your little brother. That's the first thing. So on the policing side, it is a little bit hard because I obviously joined policing not from a money perspective. I joined it because, as I told you, I like being part of a societal answer of giving back to community and doing good stuff for people. So being a police officer gives you a unique ability and authority to, at any time in your local jurisdiction, help someone for any reason, especially if it comes within a criminal matter. And we tend to know all the resources available in that local jurisdiction. I love that I've been given that authority and privilege to help people, and I still do it 12 years later, even though sometimes I don't sleep as a result of it. There are good people doing the job. And what really pulls at my heartstrings a little bit is it's getting exhausting hearing everything that we are doing wrong constantly on TV, by the community. What you are talking about is everything that is wrong systematically with the profession, and the profession did stem back in the 1500s from slave patrols and things of that nature. That's actually where it started. But what you're talking about is systematic issues and folks who are in the profession who don't need to be. There are people doing the job today who are mothers, sisters, brothers, fathers, who have diseases like multiple sclerosis or asthma, who do the job. They barely get sleep. They go home, and they are policing in jurisdictions where they can't even live because, you know, houses are $1 million, right? It's hard. I would just say that the whole issue opened my eyes to look at myself, just to make sure I'm doing the right things out there. I believe that I am. I think we all have inherent and unconscious bias. I grew up a certain way, right? Like I grew up in inner city Boston for a little bit and then moved to the burbs, so I have a little bit juxtaposition on both. And those experiences follow you and form who you are, and you act like that, or you use those to act in a certain way. So you can reevaluate the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. But no matter what, I am still going to go out there. No matter what, there are still good people doing the job. I feel like I have a place in my community and an authority in my community to help people. But point blank, the people who are in the profession who are doing it the wrong way need to get the F out, because that may be my son they're pulling over one day. And I made a post on LinkedIn and Instagram about this. I said, I'm a black man first. I'm also a father, but I'm also a police officer. I shouldn't have to teach my 20-year-old son what to do if a police officer pulls him over to keep him safe, but I have. And I shouldn't have to answer the question, because he called me. I won't forget this either. This was 2 weeks after George Floyd. My 20-year-old, who's autistic, by the way, called me and said, hey, Dad, should I stop driving? Like, that is the worst thing, the worst conversation I've ever had to have with my son, because what he was referring to were people in the profession, and I'm in the profession as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm on both sides of the aisle, but my primary side of the aisle is that I'm a black man growing up in America, and I have 2 black sons, and there are changes that need to be made to make sure that we all exist without, you know, those types of issues.
Got you. Yeah. And well, I appreciate you sharing, especially the part about you being a father and having, you know, 2 black sons. And that is a tough conversation to have. I mean, I have a 17-year-old, and he just crawled in here. He wanted to sit and listen.
Yeah. So.
You're right. I had to sit down and teach him how to make sure that his blackness isn't viewed as a weapon.
A weapon, yeah.
And it's tough. And I remember, you know, my kids, they asked me, they're like, Dad, we've never seen you cry. You don't get scared. Nothing, you know, fears you. They were like, you know, what are you scared of? And in my head, I'm like, you know, I'm scared of you guys going out into society and all these, you know, knowing that there's a lot of bad things out there and something happening to you.
Yeah.
And, you know, that just scares me to death. So I appreciate you, you know, you opening up and sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
What's been the toughest part of your journey with all of this? I mean, military, police, your real estate ventures.
You know what, brother? I think it goes, the toughest part, it goes back to what I said before, where it is good when you find like-minded people. Like, in every instance, I can equate difficult times to me doing things on my own. When, you know this, because I said the story up at the powwow, but when I found real estate when I was 22 and started systematically investing, right, until I got to, that was 2002. So 2014 was where I told you I hit my financial freedom point, right? So for that 12-year period, really close to the 13, 14 years, like it was not a good place for me to be at all, because I was constantly doing that stuff on my own. And then when the fellas was going out during the weekend, I couldn't, because I was, you know, replacing toilets and painting and dealing with termites and roaches and pissed off tenants and all those types of things. And at the time, I owned property as far north as the Delaware, Maryland line, and as far south as Fredericksburg, Virginia. and like 40 different places. And I was constantly back and forth doing that stuff on my own. So I gave up my 20s. I don't really feel like I had a social life. I think I lost a lot of my boys. One of my best friends who I was so tight with during that decade, we're still tight to this day, but we don't see each other as much anymore. I gave that all up because I was so focused on that particular goal. It would have been better if I was doing it with people, or if I had a partner, or if I was radically open and told people exactly why I was acting the way that I was acting. Because I wanted this financial freedom thing so bad, I didn't want to be beholden to the man anymore whatsoever and all that type of stuff, right? I should have done a better job with my friends back in the day to explain why it meant so much to me. Nowadays, it's totally different. I explain exactly what the hell I'm doing, and I find common threads with people, and those are the people I tend to hang out with, as opposed to trying to fit myself into a place or a circle where I don't belong. So that would be the hardest thing that I've done over my career, is like take on so many endeavors on my own. But at the same time, Greg, I wouldn't change a thing right now, because had I not gone through all that, I would not have formed into the person who I am now. And I do kind of believe I'm more of a conscious capitalist, right? Like I'm doing all this venture stuff, but in reality, I'm more one of those guys who wants to give back to the world and have impact and all those types of things. So, it's a double-edged sword, but I rather be with and around like-minded people nowadays than not.
Okay. Well, being a conscious capitalist and the selfless service that you have, put into practice into your everyday life.
Yeah.
It makes me ask the question of, have you hurt people in the process, and how did you make amends?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I don't think I purposefully hurt people, but consider, when you are an entrepreneur, you are taking time away from your family. You are not being at the baseball event for your kid. You are not the one who is constantly, picking up your child at school. You also are growing in a different sense than your friends, per se. And I may have articulated in an uneducated way, in an uneducated manner, that, hey, what I'm doing is better than what you guys are doing. That's not right. Just because I go down the entrepreneurial path does not mean that someone who is going the typical 9-to-5 path is any less or better. It just means that I'm doing something different. And I think what I was doing back in the day was articulating that was the only way to get out of this, to get out of, this, I call it the Beltway. We have a Beltway around DC, so I call it the Beltway rat race. Like, no, there's a lot of people who love their day-to-day jobs and what they do, and I think that's phenomenal. Where I made mistakes back in the day was thinking that my way was the only way, or was the right way. So I think I hurt people back in the day for sure. And I also think that I did not spend enough time with my now 20-year-old. And now I have a 7-year-old, and I don't want to make the same mistakes that I made with my 20-year-old. Because when I tell you I was grinding, Greg, I would come home from my 9-to-5 gig, do homework with Jalen, who's my now 20-year-old. And then by 7 o'clock, I was on a real estate grind, and he would just never see me. And I just didn't realize how much I was doing. And that's on top of the deployments and the TDYs and I always justified it by, well, I got to go do this. I'll be back. And it should really have been the reverse. It should have been like, what do you need? And let me see if I can fit everything else around that. So close friends and family, yeah, I think I could have done a lot better. I'm still trying to do better because I still have goals. But that would probably be the one thing that I would have kind of taken a better look at how I approached it.
Got you. I got you. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
When you look at those tough times, what kept you going when you wanted to give up?
Greg, man, I remember I remember being in my driveway when I was 8 years old, and my dad had installed a above ground pool in the backyard because he wanted me and my older brother to have something different. And I was rocking like LL Cool J or something. Through the basement window, you could see it playing on my TV. It was like a VCR connected to a monitor. It wasn't even a TV. And like LL was talking about Around the Way Girl and all, you know, the ropes and the chains and all that stuff. I remember distinctly having a feeling that I was going to be in command of my time and my own life as far back as when I was 8 years old. If you fast forward to what happened when I was 22 years old and I went down the real estate path, and then I got those military scholarships to go to college, and then I became a special agent to see the world and all that. Everything that I have done, I think, has been relatively intentional towards seeing the world, experiencing the most possible, and then controlling my time. Meaning, I don't have to be any particular place because I can work from anywhere, or money is coming in from real estate, or all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That is what kept me going, because I refused to wait until I was 70 years old to go do the things that I want to do. Tim Ferriss talks about this concept of the new rich. I talked to you guys and Jerome about it too, where the new rich has nothing to do with money. It has to do with people using the resources of time and mobility to go do the things they want to do and be the places where they want to be. So for me, the time comes from creating passive income off of real estate and being involved in careers where I can take time off without too much hassle. So, you know, I'm part-time for the police department now. I can take off 6 days and I'm gone for almost a month, right? The mobility part is I can travel all over the world. I have friends everywhere. I don't buy a lot of stuff. I'm not a consumer at all. I'm more of a minimalist. I don't get my mail anywhere. It comes to a virtual interface. I was always so focused on my own concept of freedom that when there were any roadblocks or pitfalls that got in my way, I knew that they weren't going to last. Because here I am at age 44, having gone through all these things that I've gone through, and I feel like I am in complete control of my domain. To your point, at the expense of certain people and certain relationships that I could have taken care of better. But here I am at 44, available to someone like you to come talk on this podcast, available to go support our guys on the, you know, the real estate stuff, available to jump right now. And I think I'm going to go to Lebanon next week. With all this COVID stuff, you're going to have to find a way to do the things you want to do in a safe manner. But a friend of mine is having an event and I want to be there. So I'm going to work to be there. I'm in control of it. So in answer to your question, like, what did you do with obstacles when the obstacles came up? I don't know. Like, even at the downturn, the financial downturn of 2008, I got crushed. But I negotiated every single issue I had with every single bank. And I think it was like 12 of them. I refused to file bankruptcy, or I refused to follow the easy path. I negotiated every single thing. I paid every single bill. I maintained all those houses I had worked so hard to get. And it was like a 4-year crusade because I wanted to get to this point today where I have the ability to talk to someone like you and to say that in general, I've reached my freedom space, right?
Yeah.
So it's because I had this image of what I wanted. Like, I put stuff on the walls the way that I mentioned to you before. And because I had that vision of what I wanted life to be like, I actually think I made it, like probably about 2 years ago. Like, it just has all started to come together. So it was worth it, if that makes sense. I did anything I had to do to get over the speed bumps to get to this vision of what I thought life should feel like. And here I am, 44, relatively young, relatively strong, relatively healthy. And I got decades to go do amazing things that I'm not waiting until I'm 75 to do.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you bring that up, because it's like you started at such a young age, sacrificing your youth to build, you know, your financial freedom, and also selfless service to, your country. And we sway along the signs of dealing with trauma and grief and all of this.
Yep.
And, I have to ask, what was it at that age that made you want to sacrifice your youth so that you would have a better life? One, and then the other question was, do you feel like people have to wait until something bad has happened in order to change, to make a change?
What was it, man? I don't know what it was at 8 years old. I was just a dreamer. But I can tell you an event at 15 where my family brought over an exchange student to my crib, and they stayed with me for a month. And then I went over to Paris and I stayed with them, and I call him my second dad. He drove me around with his son Matthew. He drove me around France for 30 days. And here I was, inner city Boston kid, experiencing life in a very different way. I just kind of recognized that I didn't want life to be what I was looking at back in the city, which was, back then I was still drinking 40s and sitting on stoops, and I wasn't much of a smoker, but from time to time hitting some weed or whatever I was doing, just dumb stuff. I would go to the club, the under 18 club, and look for fights. Like, it was just nonsense. And fortunately, I got exposed to a different way of being, or even just the concept of there are people who are living different ways. Go explore all of them and go figure it out what it is that you want your life to be like. It was that's the only event I can think of that triggered me to think a particular way. But I don't think it requires you to go through trauma. I know what you're saying from a trauma perspective. There was not something that happened to me that was so bad or violent or anything when I was growing up. I had a very stable family, and I'm very grateful for that. Typical mom and dad, always in the house, first boyfriend, girlfriend. My dad chased my mom from Haiti, and they've been together ever since, like 60 years now, or 55, 60 years. Had an amazing older brother. I was the book smart guy. He was the street smart cat. Like, I was good. I just wanted something different than I saw everybody else doing. I think one of the things is, if you find yourself on the side of the fence where there's a ton of people doing the same thing, consider going to the other side of the fence where there's not a lot of people doing that thing, right? I don't like following the crowd. Never have, probably never will, ever. So I didn't have an event or anything. And no, Greg, I don't think people need to wait for something to happen. But it does tend to happen, right? Where people go through a traumatic event, and all of a sudden they'll find someone who is doing something that they've always wanted to do, and then they'll go do it because it triggers them that life can be a bit different. I was just fortunate that I didn't have an event that triggered that. I just kind of always wanted it, and I didn't want to follow what the crowd did.
Yeah. Okay. And so with, all of these different endeavors that you embarked on, did you get help along the way? Professional help, life coaches, mentors, counselors?
Yeah. In the beginning, Greg, help was in the form of books. The whole thing was like, back then we had libraries, right? Like, libraries are around, but nobody really goes anymore and stuff. But I would constantly go to the library and read about life-related stuff overseas, and then real estate. And then I was like, F it. I don't care if I stumble forward. I'm just going to do it. So that first year when I was 22 or 23 and I bought my first place, I bought 10 more that year just by reading books. But if you fast forward now, what ends up happening is I get coaches for everything, for coaches and mentors, and not free ones necessarily. Sometimes I'll pay for it. Sometimes I'll use, insurance or whatever. There is an expert in everything that we can do, and you can clip the learning curve by days, months, or years if you just lean on somebody who already has the expertise in the subject that you're trying to tackle. And yes, of course that works from an entrepreneurial perspective. Just, you want to own a restaurant? Find someone who owns a restaurant. You want to buy multifamily real estate? Find someone who owns multifamily real estate. You want to kick up your game and buy a building that's 250 apartments, find someone who's bought 500 apartments and see if you can get time with that person. But at the same level, it's the same thing with behavioral health and physical health. Dude, I played football my whole life. That means I've been in the gym since I was 14 years old. When I came back from that deployment in 2016, the environment by which I was existing in East Africa, you know how the military is, man. There's chicken breast every day. There's broccoli every day. There's a gym right there. When I came back like a monster, I was massive. But you bring yourself back into this regular world environment with kids and stressors and all. It's very hard to focus on your health like that. So I'm getting up. I literally just started a search. I want a particular type of personal trainer because I don't have, after 30 years, I don't have the same motivations that I had when I was 15 years old, when I was starting to strap on the pads to play football. So I'm telling you, I need help from a physical fitness perspective because I just ain't got it like I used to. I'm tired of going to the gym, bro. We've been going to the gym for 30 years, man. It's the same damn bench press. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm going to get a coach for that. I'm going to get a coach. I have a new business coach that's helping me and my partners. I still, when I go for my annual physicals, I still see a behavioral specialist just to like check in and make sure I'm thinking about life the right way. Mm-hmm. Get coaches, get mentors, and lastly, surround yourself with like-minded people who are trying to do the things that you do. I got one best friend now. Whenever I pop anywhere in the world, he comes with me. I would always used to do all that travel all on my own, and now my boy comes with me, man, and it's just the best because you got someone who can relate to you with what you're doing. So coaches, mentors, like-minded people, absolutely.
Got you. Okay. Well, what advice would you give your younger self? I mean, given the fact that, you know, Mama made it, you know, you were already there.
The advice I'd give my younger self, focus more on family. For the first time, I see my mom and dad getting older. That scares me a little bit. I lost my grandfather this year to COVID. He was 97. I sat down with him. He early onset Alzheimer's started about a year ago. I sat down with him and talked with him about the fact that he was a refugee from Haiti because the dictator back in the 70s didn't like him. He bounced to Belgium. He ran to Belgium, and then he got into the States and got naturalized. Like, I didn't know his whole story. And when I sat down with him and talked about his whole story and how his dad's dad, so my great-great-grandfather grew up in a village in France. Like, I didn't know that because I never took the time to recognize that the historical context of my own family is a beautiful one that deserved to be explored. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything has been so forward and so focused on business and life and stuff like that. I would have told my younger self to spend way more time with my pops. My family lives in Boston, and I left Boston when I was 18 years ago. I don't go up there very often. I don't have a reason to outside of my parents, but that's enough reason for me to be going 4, 5, 6 times a year, right? Your family is not going to be here forever, in the same vein that your dreams are not just going to sit there waiting for you forever. Like, I went after the dream part, but I didn't radically attack being engrossed in my family and who we were as people. And I regret that because now with the passing of my grandfather, a lot of history is lost. So now I spend a lot of time with my grandmother trying to recapture that history because I want my youngest to know about it, and I want him to be able to tell my grandkids about it one day and stuff like that. So in all we do, I think we take family for granted in a lot of it. I certainly have. It's something I will never be able to make up for, but I'm changing my ways about it quite a bit.
Yeah, I got you. And I appreciate you sharing that aspect. I think family is one of those hidden treasures.
Yep.
Happiness that you can't get back, especially, if you've built up and have a good relationship. And so do you see your growth from, then and now when it comes to how you handle and deal with things in life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I have gotten to that phase of like calm. I'm always calm. I've noticed that about myself. I'm very calm in no matter what I do, but I think that's because, like you and a lot of the folks that you've interviewed, I've stood at the other end of a barrel, or been in very sticky situations in villages overseas and bad places, and like you just have to deal with it, or brief generals, or been in rooms with CEOs, or been on the street with a homeless person who's having a mental crisis, or like for some reason, and all praise to God for this one, or whoever you believe in, or whatever you believe in. Like I have been exposed to blue collar, white collar, no collar, and then people across the world where that empathy piece comes in, because I've learned so much about different people. Like everybody has something to offer. So in any situation, I do recognize that I tend to be very calm about it, and I absorb and listen, and I listen for the sake of listening, not listening for the sake of regurgitating or telling someone what their solution is or something like that. So I have definitely over the years like become the person that I have wanted to become. I'm about as confident in myself as I could be at the moment, outside of my butt needs to get back in the gym. But I'm grateful for, man, I'm so grateful for all the experiences, military included. I wouldn't be who I am today if not for all that, and if not for all the chances that I took, on the entrepreneurial side as well. But I almost kind of, I'm just very happy with where I've gotten to, and I recognize that my demeanor has kind of developed from the here's a good one, Greg. I have to be the number one. I don't want to be the number one. I'm very happy being a solid 17 in the room. I don't need to be the CEO. I'm very happy being the number 17 director, because I know how to take the resources from that particular position and then create other things in life that are meaningful to you. You know what I mean? I think that level of maturity in myself, I'm proud of. I never went after being a partner at my firm, even though I was asked to several times, because it just wasn't the right thing for me to do. I wanted to focus on different things. And when I look back on it today, because sometimes I thought I made the wrong decision, I made the absolute right decision, because it allowed me to focus on other areas of my life that helped me become the person that I am today, to be able to have this type of conversation with you freely and not be worried about repercussions or how are people going to look at me. I honestly don't give a shit. That's that level of confidence that I've always wanted to get to. So things have worked out in a great way. I can always find ways to improve myself. The number one thing that I'm doing now is just being a better friend to friends, better family member to family, and a better mentor to mentees who want to do some of the things that I've done. So, I think everything has worked out all right.
Good deal. Good deal. Okay, well, look, we're getting ready to wrap up. How can people get in contact with you?
Yeah.
What are some things that you're working on that you would like to share?
That's awesome, brother. So the best way right now to get in contact with me is LinkedIn. So Maurice Philogene. It's just my first name, last name at LinkedIn. Same thing on Instagram. I love talking on Instagram, Maurice Philogene. What am I working on right now? Here's what I'm working on. So I have been in the multifamily real estate space for a while. As Greg mentioned, I retired from the military in October. I've been in real estate for a long time. I'm still doing the policing stuff. But from the real estate perspective, I am growing my business, not for the sake of growing the business, not for the sake of the bottom line, but because I am working with aspiring real estate investors who have some level of skill now, but who want to get into real estate because they know that passive income is their ticket to freedom. I am not interested in working with people who just want to go out and make a ton of money, because you're going to make mistakes if it's just about money. I am interested in spending time with people who want to recognize that who recognize that passive income can help you live the life that you want to live. So if that's something that you'd like to talk about, and you have some level of experience, reach out to me and we can certainly talk about it. My venture is called Quattro Capital. I have 3 other partners, hence Quattro. We have closed on, we did a complex in Tennessee in January, a complex in Atlanta in March, another 67 units in Tennessee in the next 2 weeks. We have another 77 units under contract in Atlanta now, a 20 unit, and now we're working on a 200 unit. Like, it's just getting better, but only from the standpoint of the way we're doing those deals is we have aspiring entrepreneurs who want to run their own deal, and then we kind of like wrap around that person and we help them do that deal, and then we all become partners in that deal. Like, I love the mentoring part. So I am not a formal mentor. I don't have a mentoring business. That's not what I'm talking about. I just want to help people get into this space so people can achieve the same level of mental and financial freedom that I achieve. So reach out to me in those two spaces, LinkedIn and Instagram. Shortly, I will have my own personal brand website up. I never really wanted to do it, Greg, but I think I have to at this point because repeating my story over and over is not effective. And then the Quattro brand is going up. But that's why we hired the new business coach that we have, who is incredibly, incredibly successful at what he does. So I'm going to work with him for 6 months and see where it goes.
There we go. All right. Well, good deal. Well, any words of wisdom or encouragement you want to give before we sign out?
No, brother. Listen, I'm just grateful for this platform. I like talking about this type of stuff. Words of wisdom. I just say whatever. Oh, here, I'll tell you. On average, people live to 79. If we assume on average people live to 79, that means we have 28,000 days to live. I'm 44, so that means I have 12,100 and change to live. That means that I'm very intentional about what I do on a day-to-day basis. That's why I'm going to get on a plane and get out of the country next week safely, even despite COVID, but I found ways to get it done safely. We have a very finite amount of time on this planet to do the things that we want to do. I think I have 27 summers left, so I'm not wasting my summer. Whatever it is that you want to do, find someone who has done that, clip the learning curve, reach out to them, provide them value, learn how they did it so you can go achieve what you want to do. Please don't get caught in this matrix rat race thing that we do. It's just not worth it. So that would be my piece of advice is like, maximize the time you have, go after it, and recognize that this whole notion of years is very abstract. When you look at your life in days, you recognize you have a very finite amount of time to get accomplished what you want to get accomplished. So go do it.
Indeed. All right. Well, that's the words of wisdom from Maurice. I appreciate you. And for all y'all out there, I hope you got some good things to put in your toolkit. I know I did. Maurice, thank you again, brother, for coming on.
Brother, it's my pleasure, man. Thank you for having me on, man. Anything for you, anytime.
Indeed, indeed. Well, hey, everyone out there, telling you to stay safe, stay focused, and stay engaged. This is Guards Down.
That's it for this week's episode of Guards Down. We are counting on you to join us in the mission of spreading awareness about trauma and complicated grief. Be sure to give us an honest review, subscribe, and share with someone this could help. Catch you next week.